Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another week, and it's the first Monday of the month, which means it is request week here at the Metal Exchange. How are you doing, bud?
Very good. It's a good week, and we have more than just the usual for you fans out there. So.
Yeah, just to give you a little background, this was a request that we had received from Matt Craig, a longtime listener of the show, and he had sent in a couple, and one of the ones that he wanted us to cover was Emerald Seas by Seven Spires, the Boston-based American symphonic metal band. And obviously we were happy to oblige, and we look forward to talking about this. But before we even do a deep dive into the album, you want to tell everyone a little bit about what's to come later in the week?
Sure. We had the pleasure of speaking to Jack Costo and Adrian Cohen, who are both members of Seven Spires, and we spoke to them for a little under an hour. And so on Thursday morning, we're going to drop that interview. So it'll be a nice little companion piece to this episode. So we're trying to wrangle up more interviews when we can, and when we do, much like we did with Shadow Gallery and this week with Seven Spires, we'll be dropping those on Thursday. So you'll get your normal episodes Monday, and then if there's a companion piece that we can provide, those will drop on Thursday morning.
Well said. Did you listen to anything else this week while you were doing work or whatever?
Yeah, I posted a new playlist, which I think I posted the other day, and I was listening to that a lot, and I'm really digging the new Sabaton single, "The Royal Guard." It's nothing you wouldn't expect from Sabaton, but it's just great stuff, typical, catchy, probably going to sound incredible live. And I'm sure we'll discuss it, but I also got to listen to the new Seven Spires single, "The Cursed Muse," a bunch of times. And that's really good too. And, we'll probably go into a bit more of that as well. And did we get a chance to mention Bodom After Midnight last week?
I think I don't recall, but you know what? I think it's worth another mention because they came out with a 3-track EP. I guess this will be the last release, from them or what have you. But it was awesome, and it really made me sad because I kind of wanted to hear more.
Yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit, and it's almost kind of funny that they had to slap a different name on this thing because, it's just classic Children of Bodom sound that you would come to expect from them. But nice that they were able to squeeze out, 3 more songs even after Alexi passed away. So that's cool. And I guess that's pretty much it. Exciting news also from the Prog Power world that we got Brothers of Metal coming in to replace Unleash the Archers, who won't be able to play in June next year. So I got to listen to Brothers of Metal for the first time in a while, and that got me excited about seeing them in Atlanta next year. So that's pretty much it for me.
I got 3 things that I really want to mention. First of all, I haven't had a chance to listen to the whole thing, but the new Poverty's No Crime album came out. They're a prog metal band from Germany, and this is actually their 8th release. They've been around since like 1995. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, they were kind of cranking out albums every 2 or 3 years, and I loved all of them. I thought that they were just fantastic. But then since about 2003, they've kind of pushed everything back where you get a release every 5 or 10 years, it seems. Their new one called A Secret to Hide. I'm about halfway through it, and I'm just going way back to. It's almost like a warp, time warp. I'm really, really digging it. It's the production is excellent, and it's kind of, I guess you call it paint by numbers prog, which is kind of an oxymoron considering that it's quote unquote prog. Really, really, really good stuff, and I have a feeling that as I listen to it more, it may wind up on my end of the year list. I'm just really loving that. So that's number 1. Number 2, a band had been recommended to me called Psych Work. They are a Finnish, I guess, a melodic metal band with a touch of power metal here and there. I had never heard of these guys before. They came out with an album in 2018 called Karelian Hills. I'm really digging these guys. They have a fantastic singer, which a lot of the Finnish, melodic prog and power metal bands do, where the singer just, I don't know how he's able to shine over these, blistering guitars and stuff like that. But the guy's got a phenomenal voice. His name is Anthony Pervinen. I'd never heard of him before. I think he had done work with a band called The Magnificent, but I just never really paid that much attention to it. He also, I guess this is worth noting, he was in a band called Machine Men, who released a bunch of albums in the early 2000s. They kind of sounded like Iron Maiden, and I love them, but he just kind of went dormant for a while. Really, really enjoying his work here, and I'll post something by them during the week. I definitely missed it in 2018, but I am looking forward to whatever comes out in the future from them. And finally, shout out to a longtime listener and friend of the show, Uncle Knops. I have an album that I am specifically mentioning for you. There's a band out of Australia called The Stranger. They are a prog metal band who released an album called Kaleidoscope. It just came out. This album is amazing. It's kind of in the whole Caligula's Horse realm in terms of just like that modern prog style. Phenomenal stuff. And as a big Haken fanboy, you will absolutely go nuts for this album. So if you're listening, Uncle Knops, and I know you are, The Stranger Kaleidoscope, definitely check that out.
Yes, I did get a chance to listen to one of the singles from that album, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And it's definitely right up Knops's alley. I believe the song was, I forgot what the song was, but it was good. I liked it.
Good.
Yeah. Oh, and you know what? Guess what? I just looked at this list and now I'm reminded of more stuff. And the song was The Gemini, now that I look at it. Glenn from Prog Power had recommended this another, I believe they're Australian band called Acolyte, and they have a song called Entropy, which is like another. I think we discussed the same thing with the new Halloween single, where it was like the edit was longer than most songs, and this is no exception. This is like a 9-minute edit, I guess. When the full album comes out, I have the full version of it, but I believe Glenn called it like Voyager meets, I think he named like an 80s, like an 80s pop band or something. And
was it the Eurythmics or something like that?
Yeah, it would have been the Eurythmics. Yeah. It's awesome. I really enjoyed it. And then, also, Mike Crea, who, recommended Megadeth, or requested Megadeth a couple weeks ago. He recommended a band that he discovered called While She Sleeps, which is more of a core band, but, there was a song called Enlightenment that I'm really enjoying quite a bit. That was the song he enjoyed the most. So he sent that my way, and so that made its way. Both those songs made their way onto the playlist, the new playlist that I posted, and the Stranger song, The Gemini, will be on the next playlist whenever that drops. So just wanted to mention those as well.
Looking forward to that. It's a good way to keep up with kind of the comings and goings, and just kind of some of the stuff that we're listening to, separate and apart from the stuff that we cover here on the podcast. As I said, this is the first week of May, or the first Monday in May, so that means it's request time. Keep them coming. We keep a running list, and we kind of hit them intermittently, obviously on the first Monday of the month, and then we'll sprinkle other requests in as they come in as well. So definitely keep the requests coming, and obviously the likes and the follows and the social media interaction is not something that we only enjoy, which we do, but it also helps other people find the show. So keep that coming. We appreciate it. And with that, we'll cover Matt Craig's request of Seven Spires Emerald Seas, which came out on February 14th of 2020. This was the band's second release, and they are kind of new in the symphonic metal world, but kind of taking it by storm. Would you agree with that?
Without a doubt. Their debut album Solveig was very good. But this, I think, really takes them to a whole new level, and we're going to really dive in and get into it. Before we forget, I wanted to read what Craig had to say. What Matt had to say. Matt Craig. He says, I can't wait to hear this episode. I've known the band members for years, since the first time I saw them in 2015. I would see them every time they played Rhode Island and Worcester. After Solveig, their first full length, I said, this band is going to be huge. they're starting their ascent, and Adrian is a star, no doubt. Thanks for picking my request, and looking forward to your thoughts. My favorite track from this album is Every Crest. And again, thank you, Matt. We're going to be posting, all three of our tracks of the week throughout the week. So, everybody has that to look forward to. So, thanks again, Matt. How did you first come across Seven Spires? I'm curious to know.
Well, it's funny. I don't quite recall how I first heard Seven Spires, but I actually wound up meeting Adrian the night before Avantasia played in New York City back in 2015. I believe she and some other people, that some acquaintances of mine, had all kind of just met up before the night before the Avantasia show, and were hanging out, kind of helping do some things behind the scenes, if you will. And we had gone out to dinner, and she had mentioned that she was in this band Seven Spires, and that was kind of the first time that I had checked them out. So I've kind of been, my finger's been on that pulse for a while. And when that album, came out I guess it's back in 2016 or 2015 now, 2017, I knew that they were, kind of getting this album together. And then it obviously saw the light of day 2 years later. So that was my first hearing about the band, but I had never seen them live, obviously, because they weren't really playing shows outside of Boston at the time. And, I really didn't know what to expect, other than, I kind of knew they were a symphonic metal band, from the Northeast.
Yeah. I had a little bit of a different experience. So, we were at Prague Power, and God knows what year it was. They're all starting to kind of bleed together. You've been to almost all of them. I've been to every one since 2009. So all these, the last 10 of them or whatever, 20 of them. How many? Oh my God, I don't even know. I don't want to talk about it. But I remember Mike, who I mentioned earlier, came up to me and he's like, "I just met the nicest woman, this Adrian. She's in this band called Seven Spires." And I'm like, "Oh, I never heard of him." He's like, "Yeah, she's really nice. She said to check out the band or whatever." So sure enough, when I got home, I realized that they had a song on the sampler that was passed out at the festival. And that song was The Cabaret of Dreams. And it was actually my favorite song that was on that sampler. It really stood out, I thought. And I even reached out to Adrian to tell her, and she was like, "Oh my God, that made my day. That's so nice that you would say that." But I mean, I really meant it. I guess they had released more of an EP, a 7-track EP called The Cabaret of Dreams in 2014. And all those tracks ended up being re-recorded for that first full-length album, Solvay, in 2017. But so just with that song in the back of my mind, I was looking forward to hearing their first full-length album, and it didn't disappoint. But that one song, I just remember thinking, here's a really cool song because it's different. It really does kind of have a bit of that kind of cabaret sound, but mixed in a kind of symphonic metal sort of way. And Adrian's vocals just, they really stand out, as anybody that's heard her sing would notice. So that's kind of how I found out about them. And it's kind of funny. I'm sure we'll talk about how Adrian made her way onto a tour with Avantasia doing vocals with them. But it's funny that you had mentioned getting together and having dinner, because the next night when they played in New York City, she was in the balcony with us. Shout outs to Milton for hooking us up with that, amazing view at the now closed PlayStation Theater. But I was just rocking out with her watching Avantasia, and it was amazing to think that a couple of years later she would be on stage with them. So that's a little couple of personal anecdotes about my history of my awareness of the band.
Yeah, it's interesting because they were, I guess they all met each other at Berkeley, up in Boston, which so many bands do, right? Dream Theater, most notably, and other bands as well. And it's kind of interesting that you have this really prestigious, arguably the best music school in the country, and yet they're producing so many different, prog and in this case more symphonic and almost power metal bands, it's amazing how much creativity I guess comes out of there. But they released Solveig in 2017, and then to no one's surprise, I guess they come back with their sophomore release, less than 2 years later, or just a shade over 2 years later, I guess, when they release Emerald Seas. When you first heard the new album, I guess what were your thoughts as it compared to the first one? Because I have some kind of strong thoughts about that, but I'm curious to hear yours.
Well, I had pre-ordered this, and the first single that dropped was Succumb, and I remember listening to it and being like, holy crap. Like, first of all, I noticed that there was a maturity in the music, in the production, in the songwriting. I mean, I thought that it was better than anything I had heard previously from them. And I mean, it's one of my favorite songs on the album. But I just remember listening to it, and I forgot who it was that I sent the message to. It may have been you, it may not have been, but I was like, have you heard the new Seven Spires song? Because wow, like it's amazing. Like I was really blown away by the single. And then the next single that was dropped was Drowner of Worlds, which was like a whole nother type of song. You wouldn't even, if you didn't know any better, you wouldn't even realize it was the same band. And this was one where I remember playing it for my friend Caleb, and him being a black metal fan was like, wow, this is like a black metal song. This is so cool that they did a song like this. So right then and there, just from those two tracks alone, I was thinking to myself, like, all right, this is going to be, first of all, a very varied release, and it's going to have a lot of layers, but also, it sounds incredible. Obviously they had brought on Sasha Paith to help with the production. And obviously this is a guy who's, produced some of the greatest metal albums ever. So, his reputation precedes him. But that was my initial thoughts. And then once I finally got to hear the entire thing, it was kind of a slow burn for me. But I think it hit me when we were prepping for our Best of 2020 episode. I don't even think I had them in my top 25, but as I was kind of revisiting some of the releases from that year, I went back and listened to this again. I was like, all right, maybe I needed to pay a little more attention to this. So I listened to it a few more times, and it ended up cracking. I think it was in the number 25 spot for me. And in retrospect, it probably deserved to be a bit higher than that. But that's kind of my initial thoughts on the album. But I think you had said like it was a grower for you, and it was the same for me. Like it took me some time.
I'll tell you this. My first exposure to the new album was seeing them live in New York City in 2019. They played most of the debut album, but they sprinkled in two songs from Emerald Seas. They played Succumb, and they played Every Crest. And even just hearing those songs for the first time in a live setting, I could tell that there was a little bit something different about the new album. Yeah, it certainly had that Camelot influence on the power metal tracks, and there's definitely like a Dimmu Borgir black metal influence on some of the heavier tracks on the second half of the disc. But I could tell that there was right away. I could tell that there were more hooks in the second album than there were in the first, and that's one of the things that I always gravitate towards. There's a million great songs out there, but if it doesn't have the hook, it probably is not going to have the staying power for me. And I could tell right away that this album was going to have that. So when the album got released last February, I was I had at least a taste of what it might be like. But to your point, and you had mentioned this earlier, and it's 100% true, this was a grower for me. I liked it when I first heard it. But as I really dove deep into it, especially this week, I found myself listening to it more than any other album that we've covered during the weeks we've covered it, if that makes sense. In other words, there were other albums that I played a couple of times, but I literally had this thing on repeat the entire week because I found myself enjoying it more and more with every listen, which I was surprised at, because I knew what the album was, having, just heard it last year, a number of times, but it just got better and better this time around. And I'm not quite sure why that was, other than the fact that I was just finding myself gravitating towards hooks in some of these songs, which I either overlooked or just simply didn't even appreciate the first couple times around.
Yeah, it just goes to show you that, like, sometimes listening to something once or twice might not be enough to really give you an idea of what you're dealing with. And, that's something for me, especially when it comes to prog music. Like, sometimes it takes me 5, 6, 7 listens before it clicks. I mean, it took me like 12 years to even like a Pain of Salvation song. So, sometimes for me, like, I don't know, it takes more than one listen. This is just, I think, one of those things where you hear it and you're like, yeah, obviously this is very good. But I think the more you ingest it, I listened to it 6 times this week, including like literally right before we started this recording. And on the final time, I listened to it with headphones on, really loud, and not just to drown out my dogs wrestling each other, but just because I really wanted to hear it. Like in my ears, and it's I think it sounded even better with the headphones on. Just so crisp. The production's so crisp and clean. Every song sounded awesome. So yeah, I agree. This is an album where if I had only listened to it once or twice, it would have gotten a lower rating than what I'm going to end up giving it. It without a doubt, like, its rating grew as the week went on, I will say.
100%. And I guess let's just dive into it. The first track is more of like it's interesting. It's kind of your run of the mill, almost classically influenced symphonic track that so many bands are doing these days. Well done, no question. But the one thing that I thought was really fascinating about the intro track is that there's this muted vocal solo kind of halfway through the track, which I wasn't expecting when I first heard the album, and kind of forgot about since then. But it's a real glimpse as to, I guess, like Adrian's talent, which the way it was recorded, it's muted. So you can barely even notice that it's there, but it's phenomenal. And it was just a really nice touch to what's otherwise your typical, like I said, standard, introductory track.
Yeah, I think we can thank Rhapsody for that. Like, that was, I feel like or maybe even Halloween, if you want to go back to like the Keeper albums, where you have kind of this like 1.5 to 2 minute intro track that's a little bit more classically influenced, like you said. But like Rhapsody with the Latin name, to the Latin title of the name, so that kind of harkens back to that for me as well. Era tenats and Epicus Furor, like it's, I don't know, that's what kind of it reminded me of. But yeah, I totally agree with you about like hearing that muted vocal line, or it's kind of like almost like previews, or gets you ready for like get ready to hear like a really incredible vocal performance start to finish. So it's a nice little intro, and then goes right into Ghost of a Dream and just sets the table for the whole album.
Yeah, this is really a tale of two albums, not in terms of quality, but just in terms of presentation. And it's very, and as you'll come to learn, it was done on purpose, but it was very, very interesting to me. When I hear songs of Ghost of a Dream or No Words Exchanged, I think the Camelot and Serenity influence is really, really strong. Not just because of Sasha's, help on the album, but just because of the way that the songs were composed. You can tell the influence of some of these, power metal stalwarts that are there, with obviously the orchestration behind it. And it's great. And these first, really, I guess these first 5 songs on the album, No Words Exchanged, Ghost of a Dream, as we mentioned, Every Crest, which is another phenomenal chorus, Unmapped Darkness, and Succumb. But all 5 of these songs, really, the whole beginning of this album is just heavily, I mean, the Camelot influence to me is just very, very heavily, as is the Serenity influence.
I can't really argue with any of that. These are like really, really catchy melodic songs with the musicianship too by everyone in the band is so strong. The guitar work, the drums, the bass, everything is, I mean, if you miss what I think Camelot brought to the table in kind of their earlier days, I think this is kind of harkens back to that, but in a totally, unique and different way. I almost feel like Serenity might even be a better comparison, just because I feel like Serenity is a little bit more melodic nowadays than Camelot, who's I feel like is aiming for more of a kind of poppier sound.
Yeah, when I say Camelot, I'm talking like Fourth Legacy, Epica. I'm talking about old Camelot and new Serenity. That's what I hear. But
I agree.
And I think we should let's just mention the full lineup. We had mentioned Jack, who does all the guitars and writes a lot of the songs with Adrian on vocals, Peter Durana, the bass player, and Chris Dovis on drums. This has been the lineup that's been together pretty much for the re-recording of the debut, from what I understand, as well as on Emerald Seas, and they do a great job here for sure. It's funny because when I hear a song like Every Crest, I almost hear a little bit of a Seventh Wonder influence, which again, that could just be my untrained ear, but I guess there's something about the way that the melodies are constructed that they do it the same way as a Seventh Wonder, although obviously without like the progginess of a Seventh Wonder, but just the way the melodies are constructed. I found that to be very interesting. We mentioned, I think it's worth mentioning again, on Succumb, right? This track is fascinating for me because this was a track that has opened the eyes of certain people that were literally either disenchanted from or just removed from this genre for so long, but they a song like Succumb kind of hooked them right back in.
Oh, without a doubt. I'll tell a story on the interview episode that it kind of just mirrors what you just said. I'll save it for that, but without a doubt, like I said before, when I first heard the song, it really just blew me away, and I was so impressed with just. It really just got me so excited to hear this album. And again, it's interesting how on the album itself, the first two singles kind of come one after the other, because then you have Drowner of Worlds that follows up, and it's like, what a dichotomy. Those two songs just go ahead.
It's again, it's like hearing two separate albums once Drowner of Worlds starts. And you're talking about like a classic symphonic black metal song. I mean, I don't know how else, not just the vocals, but even the way that the drums were performed and the way things kind of just speed up. It's truly remarkable. You would think you were listening to a different band if you didn't know any better. And then obviously that we go into two ballads in a row with Silvery Moon, more of a classic ballad, and Bury You, which is more of a power ballad. And then right into another black metal anthem in Fearless. It's like two completely different albums for me, whereas you have this melodic power metal up front, and then, but for these beautiful ballads, really just a black metal second half of the album. It's, or at least for a couple of the songs, it's rather remarkable. And it's something that a lot of bands, I'm not even sure that any bands are doing that, right? Like just kind of on a dime, completely changing their sound to a different quote unquote genre of metal.
Right. And I think what really is amazing about it is that the album flows so well in spite of that.
Yeah, it's not even you would think that it would be like a jerk to the system or to the listener where it's like, what the hell just happened after Succumb? But it seems to flow seamlessly. And I think it's remarkable to me because normally that would be jarring to most. And I know that there are some listeners out here who, I know for a fact that they're not really into black metal. This would be a good gateway for you because it has the symphonic elements of the first half of the disc, but it just really takes a turn that I think just about anyone should be able to appreciate.
And if you don't like this song, then black metal's probably not for you.
Yeah, because it only gets more aggressive from there. And I cannot wait to do some black metal on this show just because I think it's going to be a lot of fun because I know that it's not something that you're that well versed in. And I think that's being generous. This is
very generous.
Yeah, very generous. This is a real taste. And we will get to that in due time. But, it's just interesting how things turn. I think that Silvery Moon is just a beautiful, beautiful ballad, just constructed over the piano. And I don't want to say that it gets lost because it's right after Drowner of Worlds. I'll actually say the opposite. I think it's amplified in its beauty because it comes after this brutal track.
Yeah, that's really well said. Really perfectly described. These two tracks, these two more mellow songs are so well done. And I feel like, again, like it's another kind of, platform, I guess, for lack of a better word, for Adrian's vocals, just because like not only can she do this really guttural, scary, angry vocals on a song like Drowner of Worlds and Fearless, but also she has this beautiful, almost willowy at times, just like very lovely voice that really stands out in these two songs. And it just goes to show you that like, you have, they're excellent at just a melodic symphonic metal song, which they show in the first, 5 full length songs of the album. They're excellent at putting together these black metal styles tunes, and they're excellent at these kind of more mellow ballady type songs. And then there's, another segue with Love from the Other Side, and then it goes into the last vocal track on the album, The Trouble with Eternal Life, which I'm going to say is my song of the week. I was fully expecting to go into this and be like Succumb is my track of the week, but this song has completely blown me away. It's my favorite song on the album. It's close, but it is my favorite. It's such a fantastic way to tie up everything, and it kind of reminds me of some of the great metal albums, power metal albums, especially over the years, where they wrap up their album with this really epic final track. Not epic in length. It's like a typically length song, but just they cram a lot of emotion and just like incredible musicianship into an under 5-minute bow before there's this really cool kind of like instrumental outro named after the album, which was similar to what they did on Solvay with the song Reflections. It was kind of like this almost like a reprise of the theme of all the musical themes that took place throughout the album. So yeah, with those two tracks just kind of wrapping things up, I mean, it's there's not even a good song on this album because every song is great, just start to finish, a fantastic job.
Yeah, it's funny. The one of the things I'll point out, the disc only clocks in at about 49 minutes. But I actually think it's perfect. Sometimes I find myself listening to these albums that go on for 70 minutes or 75 minutes. And by the end, I'm a little tired as a listener. Whereas with this, I feel like it was actually the perfect length for an album, clocking in at 50, just under 50 minutes. By the time it was over, I was ready to start it and play it again, which literally I did. I had this thing on repeat this week. It was refreshing just because it's long enough that you feel like you're satisfied, but short enough that you don't feel like it's exhausting to listen to. So for me, it was just like kind of the perfect length. And it's the number one word I would say is it was a grower. I liked it when I first heard it, and I wound up, jumping on with you to record and wound up loving the album. And I think that that's just a testament to what you said earlier. Sometimes I think that I'm definitely guilty of just not giving things enough time. And if it doesn't grab me within the first listen, I kind of toss it to the side because we're just inundated with so much stuff that's, comes out on a daily basis. I'm so happy we went back to this, thank you to Matt Craig for having us go back to it, because again, I was aware of it, I liked it, but now I love this album, and it's something that I'll continue to play and keep in rotation for, until the new one comes out, because obviously it is a little bit timely, I guess, because as we were on the heels of recording this album, or I should say recording this podcast, and then obviously, having our conversation with Jack and Adrian, their new single dropped, and it's called The Cursed Muse. It comes out in 2021. I should say it comes out on the heels of a full-length album that's due out this fall, later this year. What did you think of the single?
I liked it a lot. I found that it was almost like this perfect balance of the melodic symphonic style and the heavier style kind of rolled into one.
It's like a nice blend, if you will.
Yeah, which I think, like on Emerald Seas, they did a good job of keeping those worlds separate, and I feel like in this case, it's almost a little bit of both, which it makes me very excited to hear what they have in store for us on their third album. I'm really looking forward to hearing it.
I totally agree. And before we kind of wrap things up and rate the album, I just want to give my track of the week. It was going to be so easy for me to choose Succumb, just because it was one of my favorite songs of 2020. But just in terms of the mood I was in and what really just kind of grabbed me, I won't say it's my favorite track, but I will say that Fearless is my track of the week. If you want something a little bit different, it's just really just the most beautiful, brutal song you can have.
Well, since Succumb wasn't either one of our tracks of the week, I'll give it its own award. It's my new favorite song about cinnamon.
Yeah, there you go. I like it. I like it a lot. I think that is a nice testament to the album. I think that I look forward, as I said, to hearing the new album when it comes out this fall, and I do believe we'll hear some more stuff before then, so that should be good. On a scale of 1 to 10, what are you rating this album?
For me, it's a 9.0. And I think that with time and as, it becomes one of those like old time classics for us that 20 years from now we go back and listen to, I can see it getting a higher rating at that point. It's like the reason Eternity X's The Edge gets a 10 is because it came out in 1997 and not last year.
Like a fine wine getting better with age, right?
Exactly. Like it's really kind of hard, I think, to crack the 9 threshold on an album that's brand new, because I feel like to really make it the perfect album, it's got to have that seasoning where it's been with you for a certain amount of time. So I'll say this is about as good of a rating as I could give an album that's only about a year old.
I'm totally with you. I'm going to give it an 8.75, and only because I want to make sure that it has the staying power as, songs from yesteryear. That's not an indictment against the album. It's actually a really strong rating. I just am curious to see, and at some point, maybe we can go back and revisit some of these reviews that we've done, way down the line, just to see if it holds up for us, years down the line. But that's a story for another day and a story for another podcast. But yeah, it's an 8.75 for me. I not much comes out that tops that these days in terms of ratings, because staying power for me is a really important thing. And I think that that's why we gravitate to some of the albums from our youth, because we know that they have that staying power, and because for decades we've been listening to this stuff. Whereas with the newer stuff, it was great, but does it get pushed aside by other things? I doubt it, but I think that time will only push this up in the rankings.
Yeah, I had an 8.75 in my head all week, and then that listening to the album this morning on headphones one last time kind of just pushed it right to the 9 for me. So I totally am with you pretty much 100% on your thoughts. And and thanks again to Matt. Actually, I have a couple of people I want to say thank you to. I want to say thanks to Matt for making the recommendation and always having such kind words to us about the show. I want to say a huge thanks to Jack and Adrian for taking the time to give us the interview that you guys will hear later this week. And finally, I want to give a big thanks to your family, your sister and your sister's boyfriend and your mom for hooking us up with our first bit of merch and making us Metal Exchange t-shirts. And I just posted a photo on our Instagram and Facebook of myself sporting it. And I just blown away by that such a thoughtful and generous gift from your family. So
yeah, a package comes in the mail earlier this week. It was yesterday actually, and I was like, what is this? And then I opened it up, and I was like, I was shocked and touched and all at the same time, and obviously really really excited. So it was a very very pleasant surprise, and I've already said my thank yous, but I'll say it here publicly. Thank you for that. It's awesome. And listen, if there's any interest, we can obviously we can get some out to the listeners if it's something they're interested in. But yeah, like you said, our first bit of merch is now out there, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, mine has lots of dog hair on it, which I'm sure yours doesn't. So
that's the difference.
Yeah, I just want your family to know that it did not have dog hair on it when I received it initially. But
much obliged. I
definitely 17 seconds later, though, it was covered in dog hair.
As is often the case when you have them running around, right?
Yep, for sure.
So I guess it's my turn to pick something for next week. Let me just say this: we have something really special lined up for the following week. We'll get there, and we'll just tease it with saying it's something that I'm very much looking forward to. And I know that I'm going to be hijacking your pick of the week for the following week, but you know, such is life. You'll pick something for the 24th. But as for next week, I went back and forth on this 100 times. I think I had about 8 different albums picked out at one point or another, but I finally settled on something which I think you're going to appreciate. You know, we've talked about Jeff Scott Soto a lot, especially a couple of months ago, just in terms of various incarnations of stuff he was doing. With his solo project, and obviously with the Wet album that had come out earlier this year. But I thought it would be fitting to do something really, really early in his career, something with Yngwie Malmsteen. So I actually chose Yngwie's Rising Force album from 1985. You want to talk about an album that I haven't listened to in a while? This is it, and I'm very curious to see how I can appreciate Jeff's fantastic vocals on top of Yngwie's let's just say classic guitar sound, but on top of an album that came out more than 35 years ago. So we're going to do Marching Out back from 1985.
You know, it's so funny. I was thinking just earlier this week, like, how have we not done an Yngwie album yet 30 episodes in? So timing is good. I'm looking forward. I don't know this album terribly well. I just I know I'll See the Light Tonight, which is probably one of Yngwie's most popular or well-known songs, and I'm a Viking as well, which just got
when you run around the house and you kind of like take your shirt off and stuff like that. I know how that song, what that song does for you.
Yeah, it makes me very horny, but because of the horned hat. Sorry, I digress. Jeff Scott Soto's band had played both of those songs when he did his solo set at Prague Power USA a few years back. But I believe is this he only was on the first 2 albums with Yngwie, right?
Yeah, that's right. He was on Rising Force, and then obviously this one in Marching Out. It's for a number of reasons. I had a feeling that you might not have been familiar with some of the deeper cuts on this, but as a Soto fan, I thought you'd also appreciate his contributions to this album. And and I'm sure we'll get into this next week. It would be so easy for me to do one of the Malmsteen albums that I think you're more familiar with, and I certainly thought about those as well. But I thought it'd be cool to do something that at least for Yngwie fans is widely regarded as one of his better works.
Well, in all honesty, I'm really not outside of Seventh Sign and my favorite song about pork chops, that I'm not really familiar with any of Yngwie's albums start to finish other than Seventh Sign. So I'm looking forward to giving this a listen. But like there's Yngwie songs that I absolutely love. You Don't Remember, I'll Never Forget, Liar. I love Judas from the Eclipse album. But like, it's always just like one or two tracks from each album that I'm familiar with. And maybe just by the time I became aware of Yngwie, it was just a little bit daunting to go back. And, our friend Brian was such a huge fan, and I remember him collecting all the albums and he knew every song. But I always just kind of felt like, I don't know, like other bands kind of took precedence as far as if I was going to buy an album, I was probably going to buy a Halloween album or a Savatage album ahead of Yngwie. So, I mean, I literally had the Seventh Sign was like the only Yngwie album I owned for a long time. So yeah, this is cool. I'm glad. I had a feeling one of us was going to pick an Yngwie album at some point. So I guess now's the time.
Yeah, no better time than the present. So we'll bring Marching Out next week, and then, like I said, a little something special the following week. But for both of us here at the Metal Exchange, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the flip side. Enjoy the conversation that comes to you on Thursday, and Yngwie next week. I'll talk to you soon, bud.
Yeah, shout out to whoever keeps hitting refresh on our Manowar episode on YouTube.
Yeah, no, whoever it is or whoever's listening, we definitely appreciate it. For some reason, just on YouTube, it has so many more listens than everything else. On the podcast feed, it's a little bit different, but that for somebody's loving YouTube and Manowar. So shout out to whoever that is.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not Joey DeMaio in his underwear at home hitting refresh. Or by underwear, I mean loincloth.
Enjoy the rest of the week, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.